Hello again and welcome to another episode of my ongoing HTML5 The Basics series. In this one I'm cheating a little because I am skipping my whole go alphabetically thing. Basically I hit the DFN tag and that's the definition tag, and it's part of the same family of tags that our earlier code and cite tags were from. And so I decided just to get the rest of them all together and put them in one giant happy family, and, you know, or party, whichever you prefer, families or parties. They're both pretty cool. So anyways, let's go through and it's the same thing as before. There's basically what you're given is each one of these tags affects the text within it in a very specific way. And it's usually formatting based, and it's not just formatting. Sometimes it changes fonts and all kinds of stuff. You can override all these with CSS, but the general rule is that you shouldn't. You should let your CSS control everything around it, and then these tags should control their specific strength in how you use them. Basically, there's no real attributes that each one has specifically that makes them special. So in our previous video, yes, as I said earlier, we did do cite and code, but I am still going to cover them, and what I've done here is I've written out kind of their general ideas behind what you use them for in a quick one-word thing. Basically what you have is EM, which is emphasis. That's usually used for italics, and people usually just use it if they want anything italiced. So it's kind of nice in that you don't have to worry too much about you know, setting your font family or your font weight or, you know, all that jazz. You just throw in some emphasis and it usually italicizes something, and it works pretty well. It's commonly used for just that, emphasis. So you'll want to use that if you're saying, like, if you're trying to emphasize a point of some text. And then you have the strong tag. Now the strong tag, its name is kind of misleading. It's not because the text is stronger than the rest of the text, or because it's muscular text. No, it's the biggest thing with strong is it just bolds things, so it makes it thicker, larger, stronger. And then what you have is the DFN tag. Now the DFN tag is really interesting to me because it's used for definitions. And if you look at one of my earlier videos, there's a tag called a DL, or a definition list. And so if you have multiples or more than one, you probably want to use the definition list tag. But if you only have a single definition, or the definition is part of the body of your text, you'll want to use the DFN tag, because then it will separate it visually from the rest of the text without interrupting the flow of what you're saying. And then you have the code tag, which we covered earlier, but just the brief is it's used for computer code. And then we have the sample, which is used for just that. It's usually used for a sample of something specific. Commonly, it's used for computer code as well, but it's not like the code tag is commonly used for large amounts of code, or you know, can wrap large amounts of code, where a sample is generally recommended to only use a small amount of code, a line or two worth of code. And the next strange one is KBD, and the KBD stands for keyboard, and it's like it defines some keyboard text, and it's really strange, but what you commonly use it for is explaining keyboard actions. So you're like, if you hold Control and Shift and press blah blah blah, that is usually wrapped in a keyboard tag semantically. I don't think anyone really does it, and the KBD tag is extremely rare to be seen used at all. In fact, most of these tags, except for EM and strong, are pretty much rarely used. Code, of course, is used a lot in the coding community, but you don't see a lot of the other ones. But KBD is actually kind of useful in that it gives a very specific feel to the text and really helps pop it out of the rest of everything else as a command. And the next is the var tag. The var tag is a strange one. It stands for variable, and if you've done any programming, you know what a variable is. If you haven't done any programming, variable is just basically something you can assign a value to. and that's it. You can use it elsewhere. So you could say, like, let's say I made a variable with the value of a, and then I were to say a equals hello, and then I could say, like, print string a George, and it would say hello George. So it just kind of holds a value for you. Now, in the case of the var, it's mostly just aesthetic, but you can actually use it to assign a value to it and use something like JavaScript to pull variables from. Other than that, it's just used to define some kind of variable in some kind of notation. And then the last one, of course, is citation, which we have covered before. The citation is just that. It's you're citing another source of information. So if I were to copy and paste something from Wikipedia, that would be plagiarism unless I added a citation source there and then said that I got it from Wikipedia. And of course, that takes care of everything for you. So let's go ahead and just take a look here, and you'll see how they look. Emphasis, you can see it got some italics. Strong, you've got yourself a bold font. Definition, it looks the closest to your normals, to everything else. It kind of has this standard text feel, but there's reduced letter spacing in it. So your letters are closer together than they usually are. Code, it turns it into a monospaced font, which means that every character in that font takes the exact same space. So everything lines up really nice. It's good when you're coding, and of course when you're showing off code, you're going to want to use a monospaced font. So it does that for you. Sample, same thing as code. It looks just about the same, and the same thing with keyboard. It's also a monospaced font. No real difference in any of the look or feel between those three, which makes sense because code is used for computer code, sample is used for small amounts of computer code, and then keyboard is usually used for computer shortcuts. So it's all kind of in the same vein. Variable has italics to it and looks very similar to the emphasis tag. And citation also has italics and looks very similar to the emphasis tag. Citation, of course, as I said, it's good for citing things, variables. If you have a value that you're going to that you need to reference this value as something that should be remembered, you should use the variable tag as well. So I hope you learned something, and I hope that you take a lot from this video. At this point, I would say most of these tags are useful. The EM, strong, DFN, code, and cite tags definitely are useful, whereas the sample, keyboard, and variable tags not super useful at this point, since you could just use one of the other tags to facilitate just about the same thing. So I hope you learned something. Peace.